Thursday, y'all. I got new glasses because my son accidentally broke mine. Y'all, I am so excited to talk to this author. He is so talented, and when you hear the whole list, you're just going to be so impressed because I was so.
How's it going?
Hello. Good. Oh, I thought we were going to see more of the lair.
Yes, I can scoot back and show everybody the entire study with the brick paint.
Oh, we got to unpack that for sure. Okay, so, ooh, I know. I get on here, I have it all adjusted, and then I like waste time adjusting it again. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to Let's Go Live. I'm Gigi Mar, and I have with me, wait for the list, poet, multi-genre author, podcaster,
Have my books here.
and owns a publishing house. Welcome, Benjamin Gorman.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be fun.
Oh my gosh, I feel like there is so much to unpack. This hour is not going to be enough.
Yes.
Because you, in addition to that huge list, you also educate young minds as a, God bless your soul, high school English teacher.
Freshman.
So, yeah, you're built different.
A little bit. We have fun in my classroom.
Okay, so let's start at the very top. Being an author. Where did you start? You are in science fiction, you're in poetry, you're in almost like educational?
Paranormal, let's see, I've got I've got young adult sci-fi, paranormal, and then kind of what I call a gently blasphemous religious satire. Kind of literary was my first one, and then a couple of collections of poetry. But yeah, I started, if I'm like honest with myself, before I could write. I would drive her crazy with the stories I was telling her all the time, and she started writing them down. So before I could even write, my mother was taking dictation. So that's a good sign of a supportive parent.
What a sweet mama.
Yeah. So that was, and then as soon as I could write, that was kind of my escape. And so I would, plunk myself down on a computer where the monitor was just black and orange. Back in the day, orange text on a black background. I mean, old school, where the print, and I would print it off with the little things you'd have to tear off on the edge of the page,
The old dot matrix.
Oh, yeah. Yep, and edit away on this dot matrix stuff, and but that was how I kind of survived my own high school experience. Was okay, I'm going to escape and write novels. I was a weird kid.
No, I mean that's so productive, and let's be honest, all kids tell parents stories, and we don't write them down. We're just like, hey, yeah, because there's going to be like 5 more tomorrow, and 5 more after the day after. So
yes, I was very lucky. I was encouraged.
You have 11 titles on Amazon.
Yes, and some of those are pieces in anthologies, but yeah, I've got 7 books of my own, and so yeah, it's growing. I'll have the 3rd in my trilogy next summer, so I'm very excited about finally completing a trilogy, because putting out something like that's a lot, and coming to a satisfying ending with a trilogy is very challenging.
You have so much information to give. I'm not going to spend, if you don't mind, a whole lot of time in the stories, because I want to get really tactile and analytical, because you are doing so much in the publishing industry, and for those that are listening could benefit greatly, whether they're new, aspiring, or existing authors. So of those 11 titles, what's your process? I know you said the trilogy, so take us through how long those books are, and how long they take to write, just your whole process.
Yeah, so a book takes me roughly 2 years, and that was not anything that was intentional. It's a pattern that I realized after the fact, like, wow, these are coming out every couple of years, and that's about a year to write and a year to edit. So it's, there's a lot of work. Folks out there, I tell students all the time, when you get done with that first draft, you are not done. There's a long way to go, because in the world of, especially, now that self-publishing is possible, some folks think my book is done, I'm going to toss it out into the world, and just because that you got to the end doesn't mean you're ready to toss it out into the world yet. So yeah, really go through that process. I revise, then I edit, then I get it to some wonderful editors and sensitivity readers who go through and say, you're getting this wrong, this part really worked for me, make sure you keep that. So yeah, it's an extensive process. I'm lucky because as the owner of a small press, I've been able to connect with wonderful editors and cover artists and those kinds of folks, so I can then reach out to them and say, hey, I know you did great work on M.K. M.K. Martin's books or Karen Eisenbray's books. Can you please edit my own and hire good people? So that's good.
Well, and I think that's true because it takes a team.
Yep.
We think it may be brilliant. We can't see it. We're invisible to the plot holes and the inconsistencies. And so sometimes you write a character and your editor comes by and they're like, ooh.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, no, it's not supposed to be ooh. Why do you say ooh? And that's how the character comes across. You're like, well, I wrote that one wrong.
Right. Well, or it'll be little details. I won't remember, oh, yeah, this character had brown eyes for half of the book, and then their eyes turned green. And I thought that was fine. They changed to green in my mind. And so somebody else catching, oh, this is a switch you need to fix.
Yeah. Or they took off their glasses twice in this scene. You're like, oh, did they?
Yeah. How did they do that? Exactly.
So this is the paranormal YA, though. That's your trilogy.
No. So this is paranormal for adults, very much for adults. Yeah, the main love story is lesbian vampire love story. It's funny. I was at doing a live event, and somebody, my wife said, was explaining the book to somebody else, and she went, yeah, that's these lesbian vampires, and she's kind of recounting the story, and the woman behind her goes, lesbian vampires? And then the woman behind her goes, lesbian vampires? And I sold out in like 10 minutes. They literally formed a line. And I was like, I should have titled the book Lesbian Vampires. Instead, I titled it "Don't Read This Book," thinking maybe people would be rebellious, and that didn't work. So yes, folks, there are lesbian vampires as the central characters in this paranormal, but it's vampires and werewolves and golems and hilarious trolls and gremlins, and it's really fun.
Okay, but Benjamin, don't they always say the riches are in the niches?
Yes. Exactly. Yes. Like that's when, and again, it's having somebody else who can talk about your work. I'm really good at talking about all the books that we published by other authors. And then somebody asks me about my own books and I'm like, I don't know what to say, And so my wife and I are a really good team. And she's like, remind people you write books too.
Well, as a self-produced or self-published authors, we're the worst marketers of our own work sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I try and encourage these authors to, tell people about their books more often, and I'm a total hypocrite because I struggle with that as well. It's very hard to do.
Oh, we can write, 200,000 words, but coming up with a log line, you're like, that's very common.
Yeah. And it's because stuff's precious to us. I'll get query letters and they're saying, oh, and by the way, this character's, mother's maiden name is. And that's important to the author, but that is not the most important detail to the reader. It doesn't need to be in your query letter.
Of course. Okay, so you have book 2 is out. I saw for those, it's available on Amazon. And then book 3, where are you at in that process?
So the draft is complete. Yeah, we do this event where we get writers together and we write all day long on the longest day of the year as a fundraiser for the Alzheimer's Association. And this year, during the longest day, I got to the end. So I finished the draft of 3, and now I'm going through and finding those plot holes. I found about a half of a chapter that creates this potential danger later, and it's never mentioned again. I was like, I need to fix that. I never, so there's still work to be done, but my goal is to have that off to my editors by the end of November, and then be ready for publication maybe spring of this coming year.
Okay, I don't want to lose the Alzheimer fundraiser because I want you to mention that and how
Yeah.
people can join. But real quickly, do you publish under your own imprint? And what
Yes.
is
So, NotA Publishing is a company that we now have, 40 something titles. And so, yeah, people should check out NotA Publishing. And it is a, growing company. And, this summer we we open for submissions every summer, and it's a traditional publishing company. So people don't pay us, we pay them. And we got, I think, about 100 submissions that we had to go through, and of those we will choose, maybe two that we will publish in the next year. So it's a real process to pick the highest quality books out there that we can put out into the world, and I'm really proud of the books we've published.
Well, I want to deep dive into that because I get questions all the time for those new and aspiring that want to go traditionally published.
Yeah,
And I'm not, and I don't know if I'd ever pull that trigger because I have control issues.
yeah, and it
But I
is.
wanted to
It's a
talk about
balance.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really is a balancing act. If you self-publish, the advantage is you get to make all the decisions, and the disadvantage is you have to make all the decisions.
Yeah, and all the marketing.
Yep, it's a lot of work.
Okay, backtrack real quick and tell people about the fundraiser. You told me about it, and I love it. As you know, someone near and dear to me as how was affected by that, as in your life as
Yeah.
well. So, how can people join? Where do they join?
Sure. So this is the Alzheimer's Association, so the national organization, does a fundraiser every year called The Longest Day. And people around the country do different things. Some people run marathons, and some people do, like rockathons and rocking chairs and knitters, and, all the people do their own kind of thing. And I had gone, my mother reached out to me, and because a couple of my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, both had Alzheimer's. And so as a way to kind of honor them, she had been doing it for years where she'd go on a walk and raise funds that way. And the Alzheimer's Association makes it very easy, where they just give you a link and people can donate and you kind of get credit, but then it all goes directly to the Alzheimer's Association. So you never have to touch money, which is nice with a fundraiser. And so I had done that for a few years where I'd been walking, and one year I was walking and I happened to be on a vacation. I'm walking through Scotland and I'm going, I'm not particularly good at walking. This is not a talent of mine, but I can write. I wonder if I could get a team of writers together and we could write from dawn till dusk on the longest day. So we've now been doing it for, I think, 8 years, and each year we kind of increase our goal. So this year we raised more than $5,000, and we've had some wonderful writers that we've been able to connect with, because it's kind of a networking thing too. And all the writers are working on their own stuff. So if you're going to be writing anyway, you might as well join the team. You get a whole day of writing in, and you raise money for a good cause. So I tell writers, this is using your writing superpowers for good.
So, where do they go? The Alzheimer's Association?
Yes, although if you want to join our particular team, follow NotA Publishing and we post about it on all of our social media, and we're on everywhere. And we just say, join our team called Writing Against the Darkness. And we'll be posting about it again this fall. And then we've added an element where we do a dress rehearsal on the shortest day of the year, the winter solstice. So that one's a lot easier. It's surprising what a difference it makes when you write for 8 hours versus 14 hours. So that's a nice way for folks to get into it and get a feel for it. And then in the summer we write all day long, and it's a long day, but it's really fun.
Benjamin, you're running your own Camp NaNoWriMo in one
Yes.
day.
Yeah, we do, and that's been a mark that we've hit that I was really proud of. When at the end of the day we all share out our word count and we total it up, and for the last 2 years we've hit 50,000 words in a day as a group. And so that feels wonderful to go, oh yeah, we wrote 50,000 words today and raised $5,000 to, one of the things I really like about the Alzheimer's Association is that they recognize that just working for a cure, I mean, a cure is wonderful, that's important, but some of these groups that are, fighting various diseases, all the money goes to research. Well, there's a lot of, question marks with research. Is that going to pan out? Like, you don't know in a given year if the research is going to come about because of the dollars that are donated, or will it come from a university that does some amazing work? The Alzheimer's Association works on the research. They work on kind of public policy for helping people with Alzheimer's, and then they also work on directly on providing services to families who are, working with, living with this people who are suffering from this disease. So I appreciate the fact that, it's we can say to folks, you are contributing in a whole lot of ways when you contribute to the Alzheimer's Association. So little log rolling for them. They're a cool group.
Yeah, to the quality of their life directly.
Yeah, exactly. And, the family who are dealing with folks with Alzheimer's are suffering as well. Like, it's a really challenging disease for family members. So providing kind of support groups and directly providing them with information, that's really important as well.
Yeah. Oh, it is. I know firsthand.
Yeah, yeah.
So you guys know it'll be in the show notes also. NotA Pipe Publishing is that's .com, and then it also is the handle in the show notes in addition to his personal handle, so you can find more information there. Okay, so have you always written not written fiction and done poetry at the same time, or do you do it in tandem, or how do you balance that?
No, that's interesting. So when I was in college, I took a poetry class, and this ended up being a really important lesson for me as a teacher. I had a poetry professor who said to me, "You're not a poet." And my poetry tends to be a little more narrative. Often the poems tell a story, and she was recognizing that, that was not her style, and also that, I have an inclination to storytelling. But it shut me down, which was a really good lesson for me as a teacher. Teachers can do so much good in the long term, but we can do a lot of damage in the short term if we're not very careful. And so I didn't write poetry after that class for like a decade. Wow. And it wasn't until later in life that I went, wait a second, why did I let one person tell me that I don't get to write poetry? And went back to it and found this great love of poetry. And so even though I'd been teaching it in between, and so I went back to it. And then one of the things that gave me a lot more confidence, because I think, your viewers are all going to be aware of this, we suffer from imposter syndrome. Well, that's doubly true in an area like poetry where it's so subjective. And you're going, am I good? I don't know what makes a poem good, And I got a few poems published in some pretty big deal journals. And then I was like, oh, okay, maybe I actually am doing something right. And that helped get far enough through that imposter syndrome to actually put out a collection.
Oh, I think you hit a point though. The critics externally speak to our inner critic.
Yes.
And it's kind of to me, it's like a handshake. Someone says something, it creeps in, and all of a sudden you're shaking hands, critic to critic, inner and outer together. And you guys make a pact where whatever, it's not good enough, I'll never make it, all the doubt, the fear, all the being the imposter. And then all of a sudden you've made this pact and it stops you in your tracks.
Yeah.
I just had a similar situation this week, and I reached out to someone. I was like, is this book terrible?
Yeah. Well, and we as humans, and this is just a characteristic of being a human being and being a product of evolution, we are so much more sensitive to criticism than we are responsive to praise. So 100 people tell you, you're doing a great job, and we go, oh, that's fine. And then one person says, I don't like you, and we go into fight or flight. And I learned, there was this neuroscientist who was explaining why that is. Our ancestors grew up in communities of between 30 and 60 people. And if that group of 30 to 60 people was saying, you're good, then that was fine. You were fine, but it wasn't a big deal because, you just kind of persisted. But if you started to hear that members of that group were saying, we don't like, grok over there, then we freaked out because that was life or death. If they kicked you out of that community, you would die. And so we're not evolved for 10,000 people on, Instagram are giving me a little heart, because our brains don't comprehend that in any real way. Like there are 30 to 60 people in the world, but we still have that same reaction to anything negative. And I am totally guilty of that, where one person can say, I don't like your work. And it doesn't matter if there are 100 voices saying, I love this, this made a big difference in my life and it was valuable and I enjoyed it. It was funny. If one person says, I don't like it, I take that so much more personally.
Thank you for sharing that, because you are extremely published. You're very active in the publishing community. You have all these things going on. And for you to say, hey, I still suffer from imposter syndrome, it is so accepting and liberating to those of us that aren't at your level.
Well, yeah, and it's even funny to hear at your level. Like I constantly am going, oh, everybody's doing better at this than I am. Like, oh yeah, that's right. I've had gotten some books out there, and so I've been very lucky and I've been well received, but I still feel like I'm a beginner. And I think it's good for us to acknowledge we all will feel like beginners even after we get out there and get going.
I have new authors that reach out to me all the time because they say, hey, my DMs are always open. I want to help you however I can. But you're right. Our journey it's never ending. We don't know all the answers. You have to try something. It doesn't work out. You pivot, you learn something new, you test, and maybe that will work. So I feel like as an author, when they say, hey, what's your biggest challenge? I'm like, that you're never going to know everything. You're never going to get to the end of the road. It's always going to be learning. So you better like learning.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're still, questioning a friend, am I any good at this? And you're a best-selling author yourself. Like, you've been very successful, and yet we still struggle with this.
I try to. Thank you for that compliment. But to me, I feel like we rise with the tide. And so on my way up, I want to be the one that's holding the hand out to everyone who's on the mountain behind me, because I have to admit, in the beginning, I didn't have anyone holding their hand up for me to climb up the mountain. So I was like, when I start climbing and ascending, I'm going to bring everybody with me if I can.
Well, and I think part of where that comes from is in so many other fields, they're competitive. And so we come into writing thinking, well, that must be the way this works. But writing really isn't competitive. If somebody discovers, reads your book and says, this was my favorite book ever, now I like reading, they're more inclined to read my book. So it is in my best interest for them to read your book and love it. So it's good for us to encourage one another and to encourage, people to read every other author we know, rather than feeling like we're competing. I mean, we are competing. We're competing with Netflix. We're competing with, getting the kids dinner. Like, that's really the competition. The competition is not our fellow authors. They are our helpers and our peers.
I completely agree. I never, ever look at my fellow authors as competition. I just want to boost everybody up. I want to, it's that old adage, like, do unto others the way you want done to you.
Yeah.
And the thing is that we have such voracious readers. I say this all the time. Some of these readers are reading just hundreds of books a year. No author can, withstand that output. And then the other thing is that they read across a lot of genres. So if I have someone like you on, you do paranormal, you do sci-fi, people read all sorts, not just romance authors like me.
Yeah. Well, and I've been really heartened by the fact that people read young adult literature, even if they are, adults, right? And so that's, I've had adults say to me, oh, my favorite book of yours is Corporate High School, which is YA, but they loved it, and so it just, it's nice to see that people's tastes are broad, and my reading tastes are broad. I'll read a romance, and then the next thing you know, I'm reading some epic sci-fi tome that's this big, but they speak to us at different times in our lives. This is what I needed right now.
Well, and I like what you said too about there are going to be those that leave you one comment, it's a critic, and then we believe them. And that's just not true. I mean, there's people that will shut down your work at every step. And also I've had editors that will rewrite my book, and I'm like, so you have to be aware of that. But sometimes when you're on the road as an author, you're also teaching yourself how you write, how to be an author. You don't have all the answers either, but you're on the road. And so I've had to kind of switch up my team, move to other vendors that believe in my work and in my stories. And then once you get all that done, you put it out to the world, reviews.
Yep. Well, and you're so right about editors. Finding the right editor for your work. Now, I've worked with editors who are, who've been just so wonderful for me, and I'm very, very grateful. And I've also worked with editors who've said, I think you should make this change or that change or that change. And I've had to learn to say, no, that's really not what I'm going for in this story. You're trying to turn it into something else. And so finding the person who is right for your work and just like a therapist, it's okay to switch. Find the editor who works for you.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I like that analogy, but it's so true because as a new author, we get concerned that well, they're the only one that's available, or they're the only one that will read my stuff. No, 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 no. There is a lot of services and a lot of vendors that will help you. You just have to find the right fit because ideally you want it to be a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
Same with your ARC readers, your sensitivity readers. You want to develop that relationship so they are trusted on both sides so they can say, hey, this doesn't work, or this is a little offensive, or you need to soften this language.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the ways I'm really spoiled is I've got my editors who are my, fellow writers at NotA Publishing. And so those are folks that are our age. And then as a high school teacher, I can say, hey, I need a beta reader. Would anybody in here be interested in reading this YA novel? And a lot of YA novels I don't think are read by actual teenagers before they're tossed out into the world. And so, things like, hey, you're a funny looking old white guy. You don't get to use that slang. It's weird coming from you. That's not the way a kid would actually say it, And so that is, I've been very, very lucky to have young people willing to say, you're not getting this quite right. Or, this isn't the way this felt to me.
Teacher Gorman, that's cheating.
Yeah, yep. I am, and I have to be very careful to say this will not affect your grade. You are not bribing me by beta reading my novel, but I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, but that is so ingenious though that you're reaching out to your students for help as well. I think the takeaway for those that are not in teaching is that resources are everywhere. You can go on social media, you can go to your circle of influence. There's also like local colleges that will help out. So just, you don't always have to pay for services because it can get expensive when you get professional editing services.
Well, I think sometimes, especially if folks are writing in YA, they don't think of it. And so they're saying, I've got my friend and I'm going to ask her to read it. Well, that's great, but also ask her daughter to read it.
Yeah.
Get that other voice in there and it'll help the final product.
Okay, but I live with 2 teenagers and I could write a book in male athlete high school speak. Yeah. But it would be really, the dialogue would be horrible. I'd be like, bruh. Yeah. And then all this
bruh. Yeah. What'd you do at school today? Nothing. It's a very short book.
Oh yeah. I know. They don't say that. They're like, Mom, don't it's that kind of thing. Or cap and no cap. I mean, it's a whole nother language.
Oh yeah.
Nobody would read it.
And it sounds hilarious when I try it in my classroom because I, very intentionally use like my teacher voice when I say it. And so I'll be like, your fit is very Riz today. And the kids are like, oh, that just sounds so awful.
So crazy. That sucks.
Your eyebrows are on fleek. And they're like, never say that again.
The fact that I know exactly what all that means. Yeah. But you hang out with enough high schoolers, you're right. Sometimes the language is a little bit too high level for what they'll read, but at the same time, you got to lift it up because what they're saying nowadays, you're like, no one would ever believe this language.
Yeah, well, and part of what makes teen speak work is that adults can't use it effectively. As soon as we can, there's a joke I heard once about, a term is dead once it's in a McDonald's commercial. Like, and so they don't want to talk like us. And we'll see which of those terms persist into adulthood. But, the way we talked in the 80s and 90s, that's gone, we would never be going tubular. Those didn't survive.
That is so true. Okay, so what is in the works for you other than this book, the 3rd book in that paranormal series?
Yeah, so my big tasks, my to-do list right now is other authors' work. So we are, I've been just finishing up formatting we're putting out our first translation of this professor from Mexico who is a poet and her work is brilliant. And then the translator lives here in the United States. So, I read it in English first, and now I've been able to put that collection together, and it's called I Am Not That Body. Ese Cuerpo No Soy. And it is Beautiful. So that one's going to come out. We've got a new book coming out by a debut author about a young woman who kind of escapes a bad situation and to go hang out with her aunt at an all-women commune that turns out to be a coven of witches. And so it's called the Pacific North Witch, and that one's really, really fun. So I'm excited about these new ones that are going to be coming out. In fact, we just signed another collection of poetry 2 days ago by a fantastic poet. So that takes up a lot of my time, and I feel like I signed a contract with these people. Their work comes first, and then I'll get back to my own books. But I would like to put out another collection of poetry in the next couple of years as well.
Okay, do y'all see how excited he gets about other authors?
Yeah.
This is the kind of imprint that you need to work with. So if you want to become more traditionally published or do a hybrid, this is who you need to work with. This is who you need to submit. So let's start at the beginning of that. How does submissions work? Do people send you queries? Just step us through the imprint and the publishing side.
Yeah. That's and it's so important for folks to read the submission guidelines and do it right. So you send a query letter. The way we do it, and this is similar to a lot of agents, you send us a query letter. We ask for the first 10 pages. Some places it's 5, some places it's 1. And the reason that different places ask for different amounts is partly they want a sample and they've got a sense of how long it takes them to decide whether they like something, and partly it's the do you remember the story of Eddie Van Halen asking for a bowl of green M&Ms in the green room? Ever hear the story?
Yeah.
So the band Van Halen used to say in their rider, when we walk into that green room, there should be a bowl of green M&Ms. And people thought, oh, what a bunch of divas. That's just terrible that they, But the reason was they only mentioned it at the end of this very important document that told them, they're not going to be electrocuted on stage. The pyrotechnics were done safely. The lights weren't going to fall on them. And the green M&Ms showed them, oh, you actually read the book, right? And so the guidelines, part of what you're communicating when you follow those guidelines is, I actually care about your company and I'm not just sending the exact same thing to 1,000 companies. So always read the agent's directions or the publishing company's directions really carefully and follow those, because that's one of the things you're communicating. So you send that off to us, your 10 pages and your query letter, and your query letter is a pretty formulaic kind of letter, and you can read good models online. So it's, here's kind of the hook, here's what my story is about, and do include, sometimes people get a little precious with like, I'm going to tease you and I'm not going to reveal the ending, It's okay. This is somebody who is going to read your entire book before they put it out in the world. You're not spoiling it. So sell them on it, tell them the story, and then, but very briefly, which is so hard for authors. And then a little bit about who the book would be good for. So what's your target demographic? And what that reveals to the publishing company is, do you have a kind of realistic sense of how this might be marketed? Because if you say, I think my book is great for everyone, no, it's not. Your book is not for 4-year-olds, and your book is, your book is in English. It is for people who read in English. So it is limited. So figure out who that kind of target market is. And then the last part is a little bit about you. And that can be, here's my publishing history, but even if you don't have a publishing history, it's, I'm very active on Instagram and I've got this many followers, or I like to knit. It can be personal to you, but you're revealing a little bit about humanizing yourself. Then we read those query letters and those first 10 pages, and we have a committee that gets together, so that I'm never saying, I felt like this was good, but is that just my opinion? So I've got this wonderful group of folks who go through those with me, and we get together and kind of haggle them out and say, which ones do we want to read all of? Then we'll send off rejection letters to most of them, which is heartbreaking. That's like the worst day of my year every year, is when I'm going, I'm sorry, this isn't for us. Then we ask for the full submissions, and folks send us the entire novel. And everybody on the committee reads all of those. We get together for another meeting where we go through and say, this one works, this one is, it's great, but it still needs too much work, and we're a small enough press, we can't do, the kind of developmental editing that you might get from like the Big Four, where somebody is hired to work with you for years to get that book to where it needs to be. Like, we need it to be pretty much ready to go. We're still going to hire an editor, but, we're not going to be able to totally rewrite it with you. And then if we decide this is one we're going to go with, we shoot the person off a contract and say, let's kind of negotiate this contract. And we are willing to make changes to that contract. So folks, if you're offered a contract proposal, please don't think you just have to go, I'll sign because I'm so desperate to be published that I'm willing to, always read those documents very carefully. Ours is very author friendly because we're a small press, but there are contracts out there that you don't want to sign. So, look those over, talk them over with an attorney. That's never a bad idea. And then we sign that author, and within, and what we do is we never have like the rights to we don't own your work, which some bad contracts do. Instead, we have the exclusive right to publish your work for a finite amount of time. So you can't put out another copy at the same time. And during that time, we try and earn those people's trust so that they want to re-sign with us.
Okay, there is so much to unpack, and I really appreciate the deep dive because it is one of the questions that I get asked the most. And I think there's so much mystery surrounding it because everybody does it a little bit differently, and it's daunting.
Yeah.
So, of the original submission, when you send those out and you said majority get declined,
yeah,
are they allowed to resubmit? Can they
same
story,
very rarely,
new story, etc.?
Yeah, very rarely. There are times when we have said, would you be willing to make this change? But in those cases, generally what we'll say is, we want to sign this on the condition that you would be willing to make this change. So those folks pretty much know they're in. Most of the time, a no is a no. And the reason for that is just for the sake of our sanity. If we, rejected 98 people and they all felt that they could rewrite and resubmit, we would be buried in another 98 novels. So most of the time, there are times when we've rejected them and it's heart-wrenching because we're going, are we making the right call this year? These 5 are excellent and we would love to publish them all, and we can't publish 5 new books and publish the sequels from the authors we've already signed, and we have a commitment to them. So I hope that authors out there understand, just because you're rejected, it does not mean you wrote a bad book. It might be one person on the committee just was like, this didn't work for me. It might be that the company's just overwhelmed this year. And that's true of, other small presses as well. There's just so little we can put out into the world. I would love to be able to publish more, but I also have a full-time job.
Well, I think that helps people because we do take it personally. How
Right.
can you not? But it's a myriad of reasons why they get rejected. So those that get a preliminary, hey, go back and change this, do they? And then how much creative control do they lose, or how much influence do you guys have on that?
That's a tricky question, a really good question. So it's actually articulated in the contract. And so both sides are able to say, I'd like you to change this, or I'm unwilling to change this. And then if it gets to the point where it's an impasse, the author has the right to say, then I'm pulling out of this contract. And so it's never, the company gets to force you to make changes you're not comfortable with. And then there is a certain, I believe it says 10%, where the company can say, we need you to make these 10% of the text kinds of changes if we're going to move forward. Realistically, we've never said to somebody, here's exactly 10% of your book that you need to change, but we have run into issues where generally it'll be like sensitivity things where we're saying, I don't know that you've thought about this, but this could really harm some readers. And so sometimes we need a trigger warning. Sometimes is this really essential to the story, or could you change it? And the authors are like, oh yeah, I can totally change that. So those are some of the things we kind of work through together. But most of the editing is copy editing. It's you missed a comma kind of stuff, and the authors we've never had a big fight about a comma.
No. Half of us thought we know where commas went, and then we got into being an author, and then you go to editing, and you're like, I don't even know where the commas go anymore.
Well, that's because English is mean. We have one symbol that does arguably 8 or 13 things, depending on the way you want to count, and it's only one symbol. That's so cruel. So yes, I feel so much sympathy for my students who have to learn. I'm like apologizing for English all the time. Our punctuation is cruel. The rules seem to be changing. They're so specific. The spelling is a nightmare. So that's the language we speak.
I agree. Is the 10% of changing industry standard?
Yes.
Or is it higher?
Yeah, so that's kind of industry standard. The trick to watch out for contracts, for folks who are looking at contracts, is do you as an author have the ability to say, no, I don't want to make those changes. I'm pulling out of this contract. Some of the ways that some of the contracts are written are very publisher friendly, and they'll say, we can change 10%, and if you don't like it, your book is trapped. And we say, if you don't like it, you can escape this at any time. And so that gives authors the freedom to make those creative choices.
See, this is so good that you're educating us. You're just dropping gems all over this interview.
Oh yeah, helping other authors is my jam. Like, this is what I love to do.
So of those that get approved, and how would could they compare their works to yours in order to know what's good enough to be accepted? Is that a fair, or I guess, where's the benchmark?
Yeah.
Because you said, you're sending out like 98 no's. You're not able to give feedback, rightfully so. But at the same time, people kind of want to know why they're rejected. They want a standard that they need to be like, my work is here, it needs to be here. So how does that work?
And this sounds self-serving, but it's actually good advice, not just for us, for any agent or publishing company. Read other stuff by the same company. And the way that serves you well is if you say in your query letter, one of the comps for my book is Sparks by Maren Anderson, or one of the comps is Ego and Endurance by Karen Eisenbray, and it's one of our books, then we're like, oh, this person actually knows our stuff and they know why they would be a good fit with our company. Often we reject people not because their book is bad, because it doesn't fit us at all. It's just not a genre we publish in. They didn't read the submission guidelines, and there's a lot of wonderful kinds of books that we don't publish. And we don't do any nonfiction. The reason we don't do nonfiction is if you find a publishing company that does nonfiction, if they're smart, they have attorneys and they have fact checkers, because nonfiction you can get sued for if you're wrong. We can't afford to have attorneys and fact checkers go through every book and say, even if it's a memoir,
yeah,
well, maybe you tell a story from your perspective about something you remember from your childhood, and Uncle Bob is offended by the way he was depicted. He can sue your publisher. So you really have to. So we don't do memoir. Like, that's just not something we publish. Fiction and poetry. That's it. So, sometimes just being familiar, and same thing with agents, look up because they'll say on their website, I've represented the following. I mean, the books they're bragging about. Read some of those and then say, I think you'll really like my stuff. It's comparable to this book that you represented.
See, that's really good, because I know we do sometimes get excited. You're like, okay, here's my list of 20, but are they really a good fit?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, and find somebody who is excited about and loves your work. You are one of the challenges is for authors, because we're sending stuff out and getting rejected, we forget we're the talent. Like, the publishing company is not the talent. They need you. You, author out there, you are the talent. And so you find somebody who is treating you like you are the star. You're the reason this is going to be successful, not the publishing company. How often do any of us go through a bookstore and look at the spine and look at that little symbol and go, oh, that's why I'm going to read this book? We do it because we love the author. We love the story. It's never the publishing company. So you are more important than your publisher. Remember that.
I love that, because you're right. No, we're not looking at the publisher. So of those that are accepted, and you do go to publish their works, is it a guarantee that you'll take their next book?
No, it's not a guarantee, and there have been a couple of cases where we've said, and these are hard conversations, because over the course of working with these people, they become my friends. We become close, and then I have to say, I'm really sorry, but this book is not selling, and so the sequel, and looking at this manuscript for the sequel, I don't think it's going to sell, and that's really, really tough. That's only happened a couple of times. Most of the time, sometimes we'll even sign a trilogy. So somebody will say, here is the first manuscript and my synopsis of the next two, and we have signed whole trilogies.
Oh, dang.
In most cases, we prefer that they're all written. And that's because we have found, I've had some authors come back and say, thank you for making me write 2 and 3 before you published number 1, because they wanted to make changes. They realized, oh, there could be something I could add to book 1 that will tie into book 3. So it's good to write them all. I wish I had done that. There are things, I am publishing them as my series comes out because they take so long. And, in writing book 3, I'm like, oh, I wish I could go back and change this thing about book 1, but it's already out there in the world. So there is certainly merit to that. But once we form those positive relationships with our authors, we want to continue to publish their stuff. So in some cases, it's not even a book that's a sequel. It's just another book by that author. And we know that person. We know the quality of their work. We know that they are fun to work with. I mean, that's part of it too, is kind of be a good citizen of the literary community. People like to work with people who are fun to work with. So, build that reputation as somebody who is positive to work with, just as a colleague, and that helps too.
Oh, I think so. I mean, that's what this whole community is about, is building and developing relationships. And sometimes you just come across people that you're like, oh, we are best friends. I didn't even know we've never met in person, but virtually we're best friends.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple of our authors who live across the country, and I've never met them face to face yet. And I totally consider them my friends, because we talk all the time and we're putting their work out into the world. And yeah, I've been specifically thinking of Kirk Clopton, who is like, he and I have very much the same sense of humor. I love his books. Mm-hmm. I've never met the guy, face to face, but he's great.
But isn't that great? I mean, that's the power of like social media and technology.
Yeah. Yeah, we are very blessed. I mean, it's funny, we look back on the kind of awful years of the lockdown, and they were so terrible, and I don't want to diminish that. They were pretty terrible for a lot of folks. But imagine how much worse they would have been even 10 years earlier. At least we had Zoom.
Yeah.
Could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, we all were on Instagram Reels and TikTok.
Yeah. I'm very grateful.
Of those authors that you sign and represent, how much marketing do they need to do? Because there's this misnomer that, once I get signed, traditionally published, I don't got to do any of the marketing. It's handled. Right. And I know that. I try and tell people all the time, the big budget goes to your big names.
Yeah.
We're like, Stephen King is not doing any marketing.
Right. And even Stephen King is, if any of you follow Stephen King on Twitter, he's on Twitter all the time because he's building a following. Like, even the biggest names are, they may be wealthy enough that they can hire somebody to create their Twitter account, but there's somebody who's doing that marketing. Like, you can never just go away anymore. And I think it's, we have this memory because the literature we love is from the 1800s, and we're like, oh yeah, this person just sent it off to a publisher and then it was published. They didn't have to do Twitter. Well, that's true. They didn't have to do Instagram and Facebook because those things didn't exist, but that is not the world we live in. And so yeah, readers want to have a relationship with us as authors as well. They don't want to go, I loved this book by anonymous person. Like, that's not a connection that is valuable. So we all have to be engaged in the marketing, which is challenging because it's a lot of time. And I am sympathetic to that. People are saying, can I just be left alone to write? And I'm like, yeah, for yourself. You can keep a diary, but if you want readers, you are going to have to find readers where they're at, and that's an important part of the process. So even if you are signed with the big four, the big difference with, or big five, I guess the merger wasn't approved. The big five, even if you're signed by the biggest publishing companies in the world, what they'll do is give you a big old advance, which we can't afford to do. They'll say, here's $100,000 to live on while you write your next book. And what smart authors do is they spend that $100,000 on marketing. They don't live on it because you have to be, pushing. And so the big advanced books get an extra $100,000 of the author's time and money, putting it out there into the world. And so, yeah, those of us who aren't getting an advance, we need to do that legwork ourselves.
So what do you encourage your authors to do marketing-wise? Because that's probably one of the number one questions I get all the time. And, what works for you may not work for me and vice versa.
Well, and that's part of the advice I would give is don't be like me and be on every single social media. I have to do that as a publisher, but I would encourage authors, find one or two that work for you.
Platforms.
Because you are not going to be able to be everywhere with every post, and some people are great on, and some people chase, they go, I hear the newest thing is TikTok. I have to develop a TikTok following. No, you don't. If you're good on TikTok, great. Be good on TikTok. That'll work for you. If you're good on, if you don't like to do video and you're much better in text form, you can do Twitter, you can do Facebook, whatever works. But figure out where to find your readers and then interact with them in a very real way, so you're not just posting, you're commenting, like connect with those folks, and that makes a huge difference. And then when it comes to the marketing, one of the challenges is we tend in the modern world to go, oh, it's all online. If you can get out there face to face, if you can table at an event, if you can meet your readers, one of the real advantages of that is you actually learn from them. They will say, I really liked this thing about your book. I also love these other books, and you go, oh, I need to be reading those, and I need to be, hitting the things that readers enjoy in my work. So connect with readers and let them tell you how to tell them a better story.
Okay, thank you for that. But I love especially how you said face to face, because we do feel like that is gone, and like, oh, I don't have to do all, and authors face to face and conferences and book, that is intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not, and again, that's not for everybody. There are some people where in the same way they're saying, I don't do TikTok, maybe they don't do face-to-face particularly well. And that's fine. But if that's the case, if you know that about yourself, if you know I am not going to be the best person to do face-to-face sales, then what else are you going to do? How are you going to, you can't go, but then I give up. Like, okay, so I'm going to build a following in a way that is comfortable for me, but you've got to find the readers. Part of that is you've got to care about the readers. Like, I've actually worked with folks, will never say names, but I've worked with folks who, for them, getting a publishing contract was the end. Like, they were like, oh, that felt validating, and they didn't want to be read. And you really have to want that book to be in readers' hands. Getting published, might feel like a feather in your cap, but that's not why we write. We write for readers. So care about those readers and find where they're at.
Okay, that is fascinating, because I have never heard that before. And to me, as an author, that is the coup de grace.
Yeah.
When a reader reaches out to you and be like, I cried, I laughed, this scene, that one.
Yes.
That to me is the best part.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Those moments, where somebody comes up and says, somebody come up to me and say, your book is my favorite book, which is absolutely a dream to hear, right? And you're just like, oh my gosh. Then he goes, I mean, I've only read a few books. I don't read a lot. I was like, you didn't have to tell me that. You could have just stopped after your book is my favorite book. That was fine.
We're going to stop there. I have to tell you one quick thing. I wrote a hilarious scene about Thai food and how it upset this reader's stomach. And it was in one of my spicy romance, just, it was like guilty fun. That spicy scene, I mean, that, like, with the Thai food and him having a bathroom situation, everyone reaches out to me and they're like, that is the funniest scene in your book.
Oh, yes, yes. Sometimes it's the jokes we don't know will land, right? In corporate high school, the character, I was just having her kind of introduce herself, but she's 17 years old and she's moved across the country and she's anxious about school the next day and she's trying to decide what to wear. And instead she kind of goes off on this little rant telling the reader about what she likes to wear in general. And at the end, she's going through and she's saying, I like to wear these kinds of, band t-shirts and I like to wear these. And then she says, and I'm 17 years old and I'm anxious all the time and I never know when I'm going to get my period, which is why I don't own any white jeans. And I've had so many readers say that, being written by a, 40-year-old man was such a great line. Like, they felt like, oh yeah, I understood this 17-year-old girl's perspective on the world, and to me, it just felt like a tossed off, this is what she would say. But for some readers, that was a big deal.
Mr. Gorman, can I go to the bathroom? I'm sure that was.
Yep, all the time. Yes, you may.
That's where comes from, right? You're like, I don't need to know. Just go.
Yep. I literally have a box by the door, and it's, and my wife had to say, you realize you can't just buy one kind of tampons. I didn't know that. Nobody had ever told me that. So, take whatever you need, go.
Oh my gosh. That is hilarious. Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so back to the publishing. So how many works do you guys, you said this particular round you took two, but how
Yeah.
many authors are you working with, and what's your capacity? Do you guys have to grow as an organization to be able to take on anymore? Because at some point,
Yes.
you just don't have
Um,
hours a day.
yes. Yes and yes. So we tend to put out, I mean, six is a very bearable number. I have put out 8 books in a year, and that is, I mean, I would be pulling my hair out if I had hair. Like, that was a really tough year, putting out 8 books. Our number of authors is a little deceptive because sometimes we'll put out anthologies. So we have more authors under contract than we have books. You know, we've got 120 something authors that we've signed over the course of the last decade. But you know, 50 books, because some of those authors are also in anthologies and they're also our novelists. So, but yeah, we try and do, you know, around 6 is a very bearable year. I shouldn't say very bearable. It's still a lot, but we can do 6.
And then are you looking to grow as a team? Like when
Yes.
people, you know, if people want to work with you on the inside track to be able to know how it's done properly, correctly, you know, all the aspects, because I feel like there's a lot of authors that, you know, some want to do speaking engagements and some want to do like book events and some, you know, want to do podcasts. But I mean, there's a lot that want to be on the inside track behind the scenes working to just figure out, how do I even get in this book business?
Yes, and it's important to me that if somebody, I mean, I'm a big time labor guy. I'm a, you know, union, you know, worker, teacher, and so I believe workers should get paid for their work. You know, authors should get paid for their work. You know, and if somebody's working for the company, they should be compensated. We don't. So you know, there are folks who will take advantage of people who are desperate enough to say, it happens to artists all the time. You know, they're saying, "Oh, I'm willing to create a book cover for you for free because it gets my name out there." And I'm having to say to artists, "No, you deserve to be compensated for your work. You should be paid." So you know, when we get to I would love to take on staff. That would be really, really wonderful. We're not there yet. But one of the things we're looking to do starting in, I'm kind of teasing this, this is not public. Your folks will be the first to know this, but in October, we're going to launch a book club where somebody can sign up and get one of our books every month for, you know, into perpetuity, because we've already got 4 years worth, you know, so that would be fine. And people will get to choose, you know, do I just want to get poetry titles and get 4 of those a year? Do I just want to get YA? Do I just want to get an adult, or do I want to get a book every month? And that, we're hopeful, will create enough continuity, because, you know, you have months where you go, wow, this month I sold this many books and this month I sold 5, you know? And so if we could have that kind of stability, then we could take on staff, because we would know we would be able to pay those people. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that that will take off.
Well, that's exciting though. So if people want to know about it, it'd be on the NotA Publishing, the announcement?
Yes, not yet. So this is the first people are hearing about it, but when they start hearing about it, where they're going to hear about it a lot in October, it's the Indulge Your Shelf Book Club. And so, yeah, keep an eye out for the Indulge Your Shelf Book Club. And I have been really lucky. I went to this wonderful conference where they were kind of helping us analyze our strengths and weaknesses in terms of, you know, as business people. Yeah. And mine is that I, you know, try and do it all myself. And that is to my detriment. And so I reached out to a bunch of our authors and said, this is a project I'd like to put together, but I need help. I need people to say, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea. You're setting the price point, you're selling yourself short. That's one of the things that I frequently do, is say, oh, I want to get it to the reader cheaply, and having people say, yeah, but it's worth more than that. You know, you need to kind of honor that. And so having this committee help me has been so helpful. And now we're going to be able to put this out in kind of a cohesive, full-throated, you know, like it's well put together. And so we'll launch that on the winter. We'll start on the the fall equinox, which is, I believe, October 21st or something. And that will launch at the same time as Beth Gibbs' Pacific North Witch goes on pre-order. So people will be able to decide, do I want to pay for a pre-order and get one book, or do I want to pay the exact same amount and get that one book and then be a member of this book club and keep getting books every month. So hopefully that will drive some sales her way, but also drive some folks to the club, which would be wonderful.
Genius marketing tactic.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Well, that's exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah. I think it's going to be really cool.
So I know that we're almost out of time, but I want to touch on really briefly, you have a podcast.
Yes.
And tell
so part of
the name and what you discuss.
Well, very much like you, we want to support authors, right? And so I started this podcast called Writers Not Writing. And the premise there is I've been on lots of podcasts where folks would, really get into process questions, which are very beneficial to other authors, but they're not always the reader-focused questions. And so I wanted to do a show that was where people could get to know authors, not about what we do. What we do is we sit our butts in chairs and hammer on keys. Like it's not fun to watch. Writers writing. Right. There are no reality shows about writers creating their product like chefs, because it would be really boring to watch. So instead, my show is all about what people do, what authors do when they're procrastinating. So I ask about what's been distracting you from your work, and I think every reader out there knows that, because they're going, I procrastinate as well. We all procrastinate. So it's a fun show. It's called Writers Not Writing, and I interview writers from across the kind of spectrum. So I had you on. Your episode is coming up. That was a really fun one. I have had Emmy winners and screenwriters, comic book, graphic novel artists. So it's a really fun show.
And so that one I was on. Thank you so much for having me. And it was totally opposite of what I thought it would be.
Yes, I hope you enjoyed it. I had a blast on that episode. That was really fun.
Oh, I did. I think I sent a couple. I have more guests to send your way. So if you're not booked up, I want to keep sending them your way.
Absolutely.
But for those that are listening, not writers not writing, and what podcast, what channels is it found on?
So it is on the video version is on YouTube, and then it is on, I believe, every podcasting app. So if you want to listen to it, it's on your Spotify and your Apple and all of those. So whatever app you have, go to it and just follow, and then it'll let you know when the next episode drops, so you won't miss Gigi's episode.
Oh, good plug. I know I do follow you on it.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a few rapid fire questions.
Okay.
All right. Big pressure. Do you like paperbacks or e-readers?
Paperbacks or audiobooks. I either want to hold it in my hand or it's in my ears.
No, I do love audiobooks. But there's nothing that beats like the smell of a new book.
And the texture. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, I can see your books around
you. Oh,
you.
yeah. Yes, this is my study. Folks can see it's just books everywhere.
And you have to tell them what that theme is.
What? The
walls, the theme.
Oh, yes. So, yes, when I moved in, for years I'd wanted my own study. It was kind of a dream, and I wanted a castle. And so I, have not been able to afford to buy a castle yet. But when I finally got a house where I got my own study, I painted the walls this brick design. And so this is my little den where I can come and write my books.
And I told Benjamin on his podcast that there's these 2 castles in the middle of the ocean that are free, or like $1. But he said no.
They are, yes. It's a great deal if you've already got the millions to renovate them. But I have seen those, and I'm like, that would be so cool.
Okay, but I always think where's the waste go? It's all the logistics, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think people don't realize how cold those would be. I would, if I bought my castle, I've dreamt a lot about this. I would have to put up drywall inside with a layer of insulation, because they were stone buildings. They were so cold. So you'd have to really do a lot of work to make them livable.
Okay, well, you've seen Game of Thrones. You don't need drywall, because that seawater and that mist will just eat away at the drywall, and then you'll have mold everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't even thought of the mold. And I think that's why you just have to wear these giant furs all the time because your own walls are freezing cold.
Okay, Jon Snow was pretty hot when he wore all his black fur and stuff like that.
Giant furs, yeah.
I know, and
It would be a new look for me.
beard, you could,
Yeah.
definitely the.
I would have to really have a better collection of hats, and I already have a lot of hats because my head would get really cold.
Oh, I digress. Okay, are you are you a plotter or a pantser?
I am the hybrid version, so I start off at the beginning as a total pantser. I believe is the beginning. Often it ends up not being the beginning. And then when I get to the middle, what authors often call the swampy middle, I have to become a pantser. Or a planner, because that's when I have to go, oh no, I didn't have a plan. Now I need to figure it out.
I threw myself into a corner. How do I get out?
Yep. Now I need to take some notes and draw a map.
Do you write in first person or third?
Depends on the book. I've written in first, third omniscient, and third limited. And I think different stories lend themselves to different ones.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's the English teacher
Yeah.
in you. You know how difficult it is? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That to me is like learning a foreign language to be able to write in all three.
Yeah. Yep. And it was a lot of fun to kind of challenge myself. I didn't want readers to think, oh, this is the only way he can write. So, I did one in third limited, and then my next one was in first, and then my next was third omniscient. So, yeah, I like to change it
Oh
up.
my
Which
gosh,
is, although I should mention for your readers or for your listeners out there is pressure in this industry to keep writing the same book over and over and over, and that's not coming from a bad place. It would be better financially for me if I wrote the same book over and over and over. I just like to keep myself entertained by changing it up all the time. So if you've got something that works for you, it's fine to stick with it.
Oh yeah, there was an author and her name escapes me, but I just came across it. She has like 119
Yeah.
titles and she writes bikers, like motorcycle clubs, romance, and then mafia romance.
Yeah.
That is it. And
And
I'm
she
like,
knows what works.
119? I was like, is there any
Yeah.
stories left untold?
Yeah, and that just wouldn't work for me. I would get bored with my own stuff. So I'm going, oh, the next one's sci-fi and the next one's going to be fantasy. And I like to change it up. But I know that means there's some reader out there who's saying, I like his books, but I don't like fantasy, so I'm not going to read the next one. So I'm losing people. And that's a calculation that I kind of make where I say, I know not all of my books are going to be for everybody. I hope some book I've written works for every reader out there, but I need to write stuff that I am enjoying, because if I'm not enjoying it, the reader won't enjoy it.
Well, and to take that a step further, if you do read, like she had 119 that she wrote, not everybody likes that couple or
Yeah.
that story.
Yep.
So yeah, it's very subjective. But when I saw that 119 titles on Amazon, and I was like, wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of did a deep dive one afternoon. I was like, wow, mad respect.
Yeah. Well, and at least she wrote them in an era where we know she wrote them. I worry that, 10 years from now, people will go, were those 119 written by her or were they AI? Because you can crank out the same book in variations with AI. But again, this is the way we will distinguish ourselves from artificial intelligence, is by forming that good relationship with readers where they're saying, oh, I know who you are. This doesn't sound like you. So, your best proof against being replaced by a robot is to lean into being a human being.
I just want a clone. I just want a download of my brain. So like this clone could do marketing and that clone could do writing and that clone, pick up the kids. So mine isn't necessarily like I'll use AI to write my books. I just need clones of me.
I read about a company that has the description was that they had developed an artificial arm. And I got very excited about this because my thinking was, oh, like maybe it's an arm for people who, have lost a limb or something, and a truly robotic arm. And I was like, I wonder if they could make multiple, and I could have like two other arms, so I could have arms typing. Well, then I looked it up. It was one of those swiveling arms for phones. I was so disappointed. I developed this whole thing in my head that this was an actual other arm that I was going to have, and no, it's just a device. So somebody out there, please develop extra limbs that we could have so that you could carry the groceries and be working with, operating your phone. That would be great.
I think that's going to be another sci-fi story for
right?
you.
And it would be the dystopia of how that goes horribly wrong with too many arms.
Yeah, it can't go right.
The arms start attacking people with their own arms.
I know, because it'd be boring if the story went right.
Yeah, our job is to, I can't remember who the author was, said that their job is to invent people that they love and then chase them up trees and throw rocks at them.
I don't mind killing my darlings in my dark romance. Kill my darlings, and everybody's like, "What?
Oh yeah,
you can't like watch me."
Yes, but if murdering them makes me cry, that's great because that means it's going to make the reader cry. Yeah. Like I have to feel like, oh no, don't die.
Oh yeah, a couple scenes I had to cry myself, and I'm writing now. I'm like, "What? This is crazy."
Yep. Oh, but that's great. That's when you know you're doing it right. Okay,
so are you plot driven or character driven?
Depends on the book. So some of mine are more plot. Don't read this book is the whole thing takes place in, like 4 days and they're being chased. And so it's very plot centric. And then some of mine, some of our gods is very much character driven, these disparate people in these different places and we get to know them and then they kind of all come together at the end. So it depends on what's best for the story.
Of course. And it's you, so you can do any of these things.
Yes.
Okay, do you write alone, or do you write with a partner, or do you write in sprints?
Always alone, and I admire people who've done the collaborative thing. One of our books is by a pair of authors, and they work wonderfully together. Unrelenting by Marie Parks and Jesse Arnard. It's a beautiful book. I don't know that I could, but I would like to try. So maybe someday I will write collaboratively and see if I can pull that off.
Okay, well, you can do anything,
well,
but me, I know.
Have you ever done the collaborative writing thing?
I have not. I'm fascinated by co-authors, and I know it's very popular in romance to have teams, but I don't know. I don't know anybody that I don't even know how that would work. I'm fascinated by the concept, but I don't know where to even start.
Yeah, I'd have to find the right person, but maybe someday. Now that I'm thinking about it, there are a few authors that I think I would really work well with that person, and maybe we could. So maybe I am open to it, but I've not found the right person yet.
Okay, that goes on your vision board.
Yes, yeah. Find a co-author.
Okay. Do you outline or discovery writing? We kind of already talked about that.
Yeah, no, I generally don't. Well, I outline, but not till I get to the middle and realize I should have.
Do you write in silence or with music?
Music often, but it has to be a song that I know well enough that I can sing along with it without thinking about the words. So it's like old, U2 songs from the early 80s that I can still sing while I'm writing and drive my family crazy, and yet I'm not thinking about the lyrics at all because I know it backwards and forwards.
Do you write in the layer?
Yes, I write in the layer, and I tend to write very late at night. So some of my best writing time is like 10 to 12, I'm writing pretty well, and then I continue writing till 3, and then anything I write after 3, I think is really funny, but it's terrible.
3 in the morning?
Oh yeah, I'll write till dawn often. I'm a late night writer. No, so during the school year, I can only do that Friday nights. Sometimes I'll do that on a Saturday night, and that is rough Monday.
I was gonna say, mad respect.
No.
Like you guys are already putting in 50, 60 hours with teaching and all the extra time and tutoring and.
Oh yeah, just the papers to grade. It's a lot of long hours job.
Do you write with a deadline or at your own pace?
At my own pace, and I'm very lucky to be able to go, okay, if this book takes 2 years, it takes 2 years, because I know, and to be able to say then to our authors as well, they'll write a book and they'll say, I know I need to get the sequel out next year, and I have to say, no, you don't. There aren't readers who will say, I refuse to read it because it took too long. If they're looking forward to it, they'll look forward to it for years. Take your time, write the best book you can write, and that makes them feel a lot better.
I was gonna say, and then the author's like, "Thank you, I love you."
Oh yeah, there's that, and yeah, they'll say that's what I needed to hear. I needed permission to slow down and get it right. Slow down and get it right.
Yeah. Do you write series or standalone?
So before this trilogy, I'd only written standalones, and so this one was one where I got to the end and I was like, this needs a sequel, and then the whole sequel was designed around the third, and so I knew this was going to be a trilogy, and that's been really, really fun. I don't know if I'll continue to do series, but I've certainly enjoyed it.
Well, get this one done, and then you'll have to decide from there.
Yeah, and maybe, and again, it's what the story needs. If you write a short story and it's 2,000 words and that's the story, then that's the story. But I do recognize from a business standpoint, series are better. And so, I love it when somebody comes to the company and says, I've got a great trilogy, or I've already got, one of our authors wrote a trilogy and has now written the prequel 5. So we're going to put out a quintilogy of hers that lead up to that trilogy. And so I'm
Gosh.
she is just Karen Eisenbray. Check out her stuff. She's great. Yes, and she's been writing these for many, many, many years as well. And then once she got published, and that's a heads up for your writers out there, you might not get published early on in life. It might be later in life you get published and you've already written a whole lot or planned these series out. So don't give up.
Would you rapid release those since they're already written?
Maybe. We want to make sure we have enough time for the marketing side for each one. And so for us, a rapid release would be like one every 6 months. And I know some people do rapid releases that are much faster than that. But we would want to take the time to have a pre-order and, put out press releases and get some reviews and then the next. But maybe as close as like every 6 months for 2.5 years.
Well, and I think rapid release, though, also works in some genres better than others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in romance, romance works really well. Horror works really well. So yeah, the real rapid release thing can be a really great tactic for folks to consider and kind of know your audience and how they work. She writes a fantasy, and this is a YA fantasy series. So if books were coming out every 6 months for young people and for people like me who like to read YA fantasy, they'll be very satisfied with a 6-month release schedule.
Oh, definitely that. I mean, that's kind of quick for fantasy, though, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's nice because she's written them all. And so now she's just doing the polishing. And so basically we can release them as fast as we can get them edited. And we have a good editor for her. So our editor's quick.
And you said her name is Karen Eisenbray.
Karen Eisenbray, Eisenbrey. And yeah, she's got a couple of YAs that are about an all-girl rock band in Seattle. She's got a standalone sci-fi, and then she's got this series that was the Daughter of Magic trilogy, and now she's going back and telling the story of that character's parents in the quintilogy, and it's really cool.
That is cool. Ooh, talented people. Okay, last question. Historical setting, present day, or future?
I don't do historical. It involves so much research. And so I tend to do present day. I've got a couple in present day, and then I've got a couple in the future. I really enjoy writing, dystopia, science fiction to kind of explore ideas. The nice thing about that is you have a lot of freedom because somebody can't say, you got that wrong. You don't know that yet. It's not going to happen for 100 years.
Okay, I think the takeaway from this interview is that you don't have any extra time to do research on historical.
Yeah. Historical, I have a lot of respect for people who do historical. My, research already, I'll have, 20 tabs open at the top because my books that take place in our modern world, I want to research the locations. And so I've spent a lot of time saying, okay, am I getting this right? Is that what the street name would be? And what building would be there? And what architectural style? And those folks who do historical, wow, the extent that they do research is incredibly impressive to me. And also I would just be worried about, you're never going to get it fully right. Somebody's going to say, you used this phrase and that character wouldn't have used that phrase. Well, yeah, but if they had used that phrase, no modern person would have understood it. So there's a lot of judgments that go into writing historical that are really challenging. Respect to historical fiction writers.
without a doubt, Regency romance,
Yeah.
historical fiction. Yeah, because the readers who love that, they will point out those errors. Like,
Uh-huh. That wouldn't have been the fashion that year. They wouldn't have been wearing that many petticoats. Like, you've got to know your
yeah,
stuff.
they were in that particular bustle in that certain year. So now, yeah, it's not only like the language, the setting, the technology, the dress. You're
Yeah.
just like, woo, yeah,
Yeah.
it's daunting.
He was wearing what kind of hat? They didn't wear those.
That was in 1776 and not
Yeah.
1777.
Yeah,
Paul,
those wouldn't have been fashionable at that time.
exactly. Well, it has been, I mean, the fastest time with you, but I just think it's been so much fun. It's always, you just have all these gems. You're doing so much. It's really fascinating to hear everything from your perspective.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
We're going to have to do this again. So you need to look
Yeah.
at your calendar and see if there's any time that you want to promote, or if we wanted to promote one of your authors, that would be great because you just are a wealth of information. I know that you have a servant heart, obviously, from being a teacher and educator and then doing this in your limited spare time.
Yeah, my free time. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I would love to come back, and yeah, maybe we can do it when the book club gets going, and I can tell folks about that launch and how that's playing out.
Oh, yeah, that'd be so much fun. I would definitely love to support that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you very
Yes,
much.
thank you. And so I will tag you when this goes live, and then ciao for now.
Yes, and folks, I'll connect with you online as well.
Yeah. Thanks,
See ya.
Benjamin. Bye bye.
Bye.